welcome to the first instalment of the 2011-2012 IronNet NBL season of It Goes Off, the world-famous podcast of the NBL. I'm Andrew Gaves. This is Grantley Bernard. October 7th is when it all tips off, Grantley. We're not far away from it, but we've just recently had the preseason tournament. A lot of changes, a lot of new faces, and it's shaping up to be, yet again, another very exciting season.
I think the preseason tournament showed that, it's going to be a pretty tough competition again, the NBL. You're not going to be able to take a night off, otherwise you're going to pay the penalty. Perth Wildcats won the tournament, looked really strong, which I guess goes back to the fact they probably had the same roster for the last 2-3 years. They were very strong right out of the bat. Gold Coast looked great at the tournament. Melbourne Tigers picked it up as they went along. But I think, it's easy probably to look at some other clubs like Wollongong, Cairns, Townsville and say, boy, they could be in for a struggle. But if you actually look at the results and drill down a bit, I think you're going to find that those teams are going to cause problems every night of the season.
There's going to be no night off, that's for sure, in this season. We say seemingly for the last 15 years, the parity in the competition is extraordinary. A few teams, though, still need to settle their import lineups, and I think for some of those teams, the quality of their imports is going to be very significant on how they go throughout the season. But Grantley, let's quickly go through all the teams, and let's start off with the Adelaide 36ers. And what do you make of them? They've got two new players. They've got Chris Warren coming in, John Williamson, their USA imports, and of course Wade Helliwell, who spent last season with the Melbourne Tigers. He's gone across to the 36ers.
Well, Helliwell gives them some definite size in the middle, which is probably what they missed last year because they had to run Bellinger in the 5 when he's really a 4. And Johnson is still, learning the ropes, as it were. So Helliwell gives them some genuine size in the middle. Chris Warren is a very small guard, but he's got some speed and he can make things happen. Adelaide are going to be, they're going to be maybe around the outside mark of the top 4.
Let's go to the Cairns Taipans. What a season they had last year, making it all the way through to the grand final in spectacular fashion, just coming up short in a classic best-of-3 game series against the New Zealand Breakers. They've got a whole new look, primarily because their two imports, Ayinde Ubaka and Ron Dorsey, they are gone, no longer with the program, and they've had to make some changes. Picked up some good players in Brad Hill and Jeff Dowdell. Both of them had experience with the Adelaide 36ers, but they are on a somewhat uncertain ground, the Cairns Taipans.
Yeah, look, I really think, just on the evidence so far, I think that the Taipans are probably going to struggle this season. I think there's a question mark over the quality of their imports. I don't know if they're going to be up to the high quality that they are going to need. When you talk about teams that are going to need some good imports to help them along, I think Cairns are probably in that boat. And right now, I think there's a question mark over the Cairns Taipans and their imports.
The Gold Coast Blaze were just tormented last season by the injuries they had. They're looking for a little bit more luck along the way. They've got a superstar in Mark Worthington, but they too have made some changes to their import lineup. They've got Will Hudson and Mike English are the two that's going to start the journey with them. Will they finish the journey with the Gold Coast Blaze?
I think probably there's a fairly safe bet on that. I think Hudson is a centre. He's raw. He's out of college, but he's a hard worker, and he's going to be a double-double player for you probably week in, week out. English, I think, probably is a really nice complementary piece to the players they've got. He's probably going to have some breakout nights, but he's also going to have those just nice 10, 12, 14-point games you need when, Wertho and Gibbo and the other guys are really doing their stuff.
Anthony Petrie back in the lineup as well, so that's almost a new player for them because the injuries that he had last season. So they look very, very impressive so far. The Melbourne Tigers probably made the biggest changes of any team in the competition. They got a new coach in Trevor Gleeson, the current NBL Coach of the Year, of course, with the Townsville Crocodiles for many, many seasons. Now come back home to a certain extent, born and raised in Warrnambool in Victoria. He's at the helm of the Melbourne Tigers. And is it the Melbourne Taipans or is it the Melbourne Tigers? Grantley.
Might be the Cairns Tigers. Look, I think the Tigers have done a really good job in the off-season with their recruiting. You look at the speed factor now for the Tigers, with Ubaka, Dorsey, Mills, Dillon, they've really got some wheels, and that's going to be their thing. Is when there's a defensive rebound or a turnover, they are going to be looking to run the fast break, get the transition game happening. That's going to be their thing. If there's a query on the Tigers right now, it's their size. they're really depending on Matt Burston to be their big man, genuine big man. And as we know, he's had a history of injury. He's coming into this season off an injury. So that's probably the only question mark. I think the Tigers, though, probably still a little work in progress, I think, in the first 4 to 5 games, purely because Mills is coming late. They're starting to find, with the new coach too, he's trying to get everything okay. So 4 or 5 weeks in, then I think the Tigers will take off.
And a lot will depend on what happens with the NBA lockout. Patrick Mills, what a coup it is for the NBL to have him in the competition, and an even bigger coup for the Melbourne Tigers to have him playing for them. But a little bit of an asterisk next to that because we don't know what's going to happen with the NBA lockout and how long he's actually going to be with the team. But very, very healthy looking Melbourne Tigers lineup. The New Zealand Breakers, the defending champions, they have lost perhaps the greatest player last season in the NBL. Wasn't the league MVP, but certainly no questioning the value of Kirk Penny and what he brings to the table. He's taking his skills, his talents to Spain. They've picked up Daryl Coletto. They lost Corey Webster because of some illicit drugs, or I shouldn't say illicit drugs, drug issues.
Tested positive.
What do you make of the New Zealand Breakers?
I think the Breakers, as NBL champions, probably are going to struggle to retain their title. I think you take out Penny, obviously a big loss. But I think we can't overlook the loss of Paul Hanari as the team's captain, point guard, and spiritual leader. And I think that's probably going to be a bigger hole than a lot of people expect. They are probably starting to get a little older as well. CJ Bruton, Dylan Boucher. Look, I'd say they're going to be tough. Ooh. They're still going to be tough to beat.
I would have thought so.
I just don't know that they've probably got the package there to repeat as champions.
Daryl Coletto, good pick-up for him, and it's going to be interesting how he slots into. And the Perth Wildcats, they have been the most consistent team probably over the last 2 decades, and again, they're looking like a very, very handy lineup, winning the pre-season tournament. Luke Neville, they've picked up, big fella, 7-footer. He spent a little bit of the season with the Melbourne Tigers last year before taking his skills to Russia. He's back in the NBL, which is great, and he's back with the Perth Wildcats, and they're only running with the one import. Yeah,
look, and that's been their I guess, MO for the last few years. Run with the one import. If they need to slot one in late in the season, give them a boost, they do so, which they did last year. But I think the way they've set up this season, very big lineup with Luke Neville,
Matthew Knight,
Matt Knight. You've got
Sean Redditch is back on deck.
Sean Redditch. Anyone else you want to throw in?
I'm just trying to help you through.
Yeah, no, great job. Wagstaff, of course, is the other one. So Perth are a very big lineup. They've got a great group of guards and perimeter players as well. I think they're going to be very strong, and right now I think we'll probably send them in as championship favourites.
Well, we'll get to our predictions for the top 4 just in a minute, but their form in the pre-season, very, very nice. They're going about it in a nice way. The Sydney Kings potentially could be the big improvers of the season. They've been very active in the off-season, putting together a roster. Not quite sure they've got the balance right. I'm not quite convinced about their backcourt at the moment. But when you think of Jariah Grant, is that right? Jariah Grant, he comes with great pedigree. Any player that's averaged 13 points a game in the ACC conference playing for Clemson, he's going to be a quality player. Kevin Ratch has spent some time in Australia before playing with Ringwood in the Big V competition. Anatoly Bose. A lot's been said about him. He was on the cusp. Everyone thought he might have actually been a NBA draft pick last season. Didn't get drafted, but another huge impact player for the Sydney Kings. They're looking solid, Grantley.
Look, I think the Kings, and they were quite impressive at the pre-season tournament. Give them a lot of credit. Their backcourt players, Aaron Bruce.
A veteran.
Yep. Luke Martin. And Luke Cooper.
Yep.
A lot of speed in that 3.
Well, Luke Cooper looked good last year before he did his knee.
Yep. And so very speedy backcourt. And they're another team like the Tigers. They're going to push the ball up the floor a lot. Grant was impressive. For a young player straight out of college, I think he's going to be a real asset. Ratch can probably be looked at as a role player, but again, he can do the job.
He's going to fill up the stat sheet. He does a bit of everything. He rebounds well. He can pass the ball. Can knock down a shot.
And they were out on the weekend. Our man Ben Madgen.
Oh yes.
And so he's got to come back into that lineup.
Oh my.
Yes. And I think the Kings, the Kings. if they're younger players and they're inexperienced players, if they mature as the season goes along,
yes,
I think they're going to be decent.
Oh, they'll be better than decent.
Yeah.
I think they have the potential to be better than decent. And if Aaron Bruce can really get back to his absolute very best,
look, they pushed Perth. They pushed Perth in the grand final of the preseason tournament, and it was probably only a couple of brain fades, that cost them dearly. They had some rushes of blood, didn't quite execute things as well as they should have. And that was probably the difference between the teams.
Got my concerns with the Townsville Crocodiles, Grantley. A little bit of an unknown quantity. Of course, they got a new coach, Paul Woolpert.
Yep.
And he's going to be looking to put his stamp on the team. He was their assistant coach last year, so he has got a lot of experience with the Crocodiles, and he does know the NBL competition. But anytime it's your first experience at the helm, it does generally take a little bit of a feeling out type process. They've got their new imports, Eddie Gill and Alvin Mims. Don't know a lot about them, but a lot is going to ride on what they do. Of course, they've got the veterans, Peter Crawford. We love what he does. And Ben Allen is going to only get a lot better from what he did last season after his rookie year. So some things to look forward to. But the most huge loss, Russell Hinder. Not only a leader on the floor, but off the floor. He broke his bone in his leg, so he potentially could be out 6, 12 weeks, something in that order.
Look, the Crocs are ready to write him off for the season.
Wow.
That's how they're going to approach it, because they've got to bring someone in onto the roster to replace him. And talking to Ian Smythe, the CEO, the other day up on the Gold Coast in Brisbane, they're going to approach it. Look, he's going to be in plaster for 8 weeks. It's going to take another 8 weeks of rehab. That's your season.
Yep. The Wollongong Hawks, our last team that we're going to have a look at to see how they're going to go this season. Really not too many changes other than the loss of the league MVP, Gary Irvin. He was their do-it-all guy. He's not there. Javon Catron is their new guy that's going to be not trying to fill his shoes, but he's one of the new imports.
Yeah.
And they've already had a bit of a problem in that Donovan Munro, a guard that they were looking to hopefully fill the shoes of Gary Irvin, they've let him go. So a little bit of a question mark about them because they haven't got their lineup in place just yet. But I've got some concerns about the Wollongong Hawks. Matty Campbell and Glenn Saville, another year older. Oscar Foreman had a breakout season last year. But just put them in the don't know category at this point in time. Yeah,
look, I think the Hawks are probably... at one of those crossroads. And unfortunately, I think the crossroads is probably going to take the turn downwards this season. Catron, probably going to be a good, solid import. He can post up, shoots the fade away. As you mentioned, Matty Campbell, he's hurt his Achilles already during the preseason tournament, so he's probably going to be out for a little while. And look, there are guys like Oscar Foreman who needs to step up. Younger guys, Tyson Demos, Reece Martin, they really need to increase their output and pick up the Hawks and carry them a bit. So it probably is going to be something of a transition season, I think, for the Hawks, for these younger guys.
Not sure they want to hear that word transition season,
well,
Grantley.
That's probably the reality. The younger guys need to pick up and take the load, away from guys like Campbell, Saville, etc.
Well, there's a very, very brief look at all the teams that are going to be shaping up this season. It's now time to put your expertise on the line. 25 years experience in this Cape of Grantley Bernard, and also, let's not forget, former coach of the year in the Big V women's competition.
That counts for a lot.
This is going to mean a lot. Please, tell us all who's your top 4 picks for this season.
Okay, top 3, not in any order.
Right.
Gold Coast Blaze.
Correct.
Very strong roster, look good on the weekend.
Yes.
Tick them off.
Blaze.
Perth Wildcats, as we've said before, early championship favourites.
Yes.
Tick them off, they're in.
Yes.
Melbourne Tigers. A lot of people probably still have a few question marks over the Tigers, but I think the quality of their roster gets them into the playoffs. The 4th spot, this is as open as you could like.
We don't want to hear that. Just give us.
And there's probably 3 or 4 teams who are genuine contenders for that playoff spot.
Yes.
But I am going to throw this one out there.
Just get on with it.
I'm going to go for the Sydney Kings.
Wow. Well, it's not as crazy as you would think because they have recruited very, very well.
No.
I think that they will be massive improvers, whether or not they've got enough to get over the line. I'm actually, and we did not talk to each other, anything prior going to air here. But I have the same top three. I think the Melbourne Tigers, Perth Wildcats, Gold Coast Blaze. Not in that order, but just those three teams, I'm expecting them to make the playoffs. I am going to stick with the New Zealand Breakers in that fourth spot. I think that their experience, Gary Wilkinson's still a quality player. CJ Bruton's still got plenty to give. And I just think their experience that they had last year, defending champions and the home court advantage, that should be enough to get them over the line. Shaping up to be a great season, Grantley, and all the favourites are going to be coming back, including the Mark Zuckerberg Minute. And that is where we get the feedback from you. You jump on the NBL Facebook page, punch us out a question, and our sponsors have jumped on board because any question that gets read out on this show will win a authentic NBL game ball, the authentic NBL Spalding game ball. So if that's just cracking incentive to get out there and jump on the Facebook. And let's not forget, if you want to touch base with myself, Andrew Gaze 10 on the Twitter, or
Grantley Bernard can contact us that way. So get amongst it, get involved, and we want to hear what you've got for us. Big weekend coming up. First weekend in the 2011-2012 IronNet NBL campaign. Get out there and support your teams. And Grantley, where do they go to catch all the NBL action in round one? The season kicks off on Friday night with the Tigers and the Kings in the capital city clash at the Cage. The same night, it's the Blaze at home to the New Zealand Breakers. On Saturday, the action goes to Adelaide for the 36ers against the Wildcats, and the Cairns Taipans are at home against the Crocodiles in the first of the Reptile Rumbles. And on Sunday, it's the Wollongong Hawks against the New Zealand Breakers.
What a season it's shaping up to be. We're going to be here week in, week out, and all the favourites are going to be back. Don't forget, we've got the 24-second shot challenge, new faces, new attempts, and let me tell you, some of the performances, quite comical. So make sure you tune in for that. That's all we've got time for on this preview show. Once again, we thank all our sponsors. And there are plenty of them jumping on board, wanting to get a part and a piece of the It Goes Off program, led by our all-time favourites, IronNet,
Spalding,
and one,
Centrebet,
Virgin Australia,
Think Smart,
and one, the channel, the broadcasters of the NBL. Get out there, support your team, and check in here week in, week out throughout the 2011-2012 NBL IronNet season. Until next time, it goes up!